We've got an update now to a case we first told you about earlier this week. The Rapides Parish Sheriff's Office has arrested a Deville man on even more counts of pornography involving juveniles, as well as new charges involving the sexual abuse of an animal. 27-year-old David Buckley Roberts was arrested Monday on 506 counts of pornography involving juveniles. And yesterday, we're told he was rearrested after detectives were able to establish sufficient probable cause that supported allegations that Roberts committed more crimes. So they got another arrest warrant, and Roberts was booked on 44 additional counts of pornography involving juveniles where the victim is under the age of 13, as well as 125 counts of sexual abuse of an animal. Bonds now set at a total amount of $150,400. Roberts is a former officer with the Ball Police Department. He tendered his resignation on Monday before he was arrested. He also previously worked for RPSO. That arrest is the result of a joint investigation between the AG's office, Bureau of Investigation Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and RPSO.